So we have a problem. And then he proceeded to tell me that there was a shooting the night before, that it involved youth in our community, that it was gang-related, and that the police were nervous that there was going to be retaliation at our community event that day. So after a lot of deliberation and debate, we decided not to cancel the event. However, once we did that, all staff were advised to be cautious of any signs of quote-unquote trouble, which, when further explained, it became apparent to me that trouble was equated with youth. And so in dealing with this incident, I was bothered by two realizations. First, that gang-related violence seemed to be a norm in this community, and that youth had to grow up in this climate of fear. And the second realization, and perhaps most problematic, was the stigma that I found attached to youth because of such violence. So when staff were instructed to be on the lookout for signs of trouble, it was as if all youth were automatically under surveillance and cause for suspicion. And so by the end of that event, nothing happened. However, there was a moment where our staff were all placed on high alert because they noticed that one boy had a full red cap, which was apparently a sign of gang membership. And as I observed the attention that he was attracting, I was really troubled by the degree to which he was being judged without any effort to actually know who he was. So I made a conscious decision to actually introduce myself to this young man, to welcome him to the event, and after some minutes of conversation, we ended up playing basketball for hours with some of the other youth. And so that was the point for me, the turning point. And whether or not that boy was a part of a gang or even had intentions or aspirations to be a part of a gang, what was bothersome for me was that there was an unwillingness to engage him and build a relationship with him. And in that instance, it was clear to me that this idea of community development had fostered a type of service-oriented culture whereby youths were now treated as clientele with deficiencies that needed to be fixed. And they were broken in some sense, and we were these paternalistic figures that needed to help them be better. But absent from all of that was that core effort of getting to know who they were and engaging them and building that relationship. Missing was an essential and fundamental common courtesy I found in treating them with respect. So this was the turning point, not only for helping me come to understand our purpose as a youth network, but also in shaping my responsibility as the leader of that network that supposedly aimed to build the capacity of youth. And as the turning point, it resulted in two kind of final key moments that I want to share with you. The first, with episode number 4, is what I like to call the showcase. And with a reinvigorated sense of purpose following that summer of a lot of gun violence and a lot of trauma in the community, we created a showcase that we called Youthtopia, which was premised on the simple idea that in a perfect world, we would celebrate the promise of youth. And this showcase was exactly that. It was an opportunity for us to provide a platform for youth to demonstrate their creative excellence through art. We had galleries all over Scarborough, through a grand showcase where youth expressed their views on various social issues through song, dance, and even spoken word poetry, all ultimately as an expression of their promise and their power. And as for concrete results, we had nearly 50 youth performers. We had nearly 100 auditions. We had just as many volunteers. We were able to engage local school communities who are always a little bit hesitant to kind of mix and match the different programs and services. So it included 4 high schools that merged kind of both the Catholic and public school boards. We were able to engage multiple community agencies. So we started with a budget of $1,000, and by the end of it, so many people had wanted to be involved that we had $5,000 to support this initiative. And at the final event, we had over 300 people attending from all across the GTA and even beyond. In short, Youthtopia was one of our most successful events, and we were able to mobilize a lot of people around that simple yet profound idea that the best way to engage youth is by celebrating them. And finally, in the midst of the chaos of organizing Youthtopia, I worked behind the scenes to develop a grant, because that issue of sustainability was always on my mind. And given the time-limited nature of my contract and our project, I was very conscious of what would happen after. What was going to sustain our work and build upon that momentum that we had established. So after, based on that fundamental principle of engaging youth, our network sat in the community center. We talked with youth and we asked them essentially what they needed in the community. And it led to a multi-year proposal through the Ontario Trillium Foundation for a youth engagement initiative that we called Building Community Foundations. And it included 3 core components in terms of a safe space and resource center for youth. It included social recreation programming, and it included a leadership program, which would invite youth to take action and engage in different social action projects and be leaders in the community. So in writing this grant, it was more so than actually defining the different elements of the grant. It was part of a personal kind of philosophy that took shape, that in recognizing the issues of sustainability or the lack thereof, I made a personal commitment to try to create something that outlasted my position while I was there. And sure enough, in March of 2013, we received word that our community was successful in getting a multi-year grant, which resulted in hundreds of thousands of dollars for this priority neighborhood and all of the great work that the youth network was doing. So, having said that, I want to return to the title of my presentation, which is A Bridge Over Troubled Waters, Navigating the Challenges of Youth Engagement and Community Development. And I purposely separate those two, engagement and community development, because it's often assumed that community development happens in short term with various projects and programs and services. But there are 2 kind of fundamental lessons that I learned. And the first is that community development must be grounded in engagement. And they're very distinct ideas. Engagement in terms of knowing who you're serving, knowing what their needs are, knowing what their desires are, knowing what the context surrounding them is, so that you can really meaningfully construct something that is responsive to their needs. And the second idea, in moving to that community development element, is that community development is ultimately a long-term endeavor. It's an ongoing project. It's not something that we're going to accomplish with one project, as it's suggested with grants. It's not something that we're going to accomplish in one event, even. And that is the reality of community development. So I return to the metaphor of the bridge and say that as much as we can build multiple bridges, if we don't make the effort to ensure that the surrounding infrastructure is sound and strong, then ultimately we'll see cracks in those bridges and they won't be sustainable. So I end this note on a call to action to really understand that youth are, when we address youth, they're not only this one subgroup of people, they're part of a broader community. And we have to look at that bigger picture in order to ensure that we can meaningfully contribute to their success. And that is all. So, thank you.
Thank you.